this is one of the things to compare it to Game of Thrones. I think there's a lot of comparisons to make there. The lesson from both of these, I think, is if you're at your end of your very sprawling epic saga, that's the fandom is full of geeks. If you're going to throw some sort of curveball at them, that's going to be upsetting and not give them the perfect happy ending that they're hoping for. You really need to get the execution watertight, because if you do mess up the execution on top of doing something difficult thematically, the way this and Game of Thrones do, then not only will people hate it, but they'll like have a built-in excuse to never have to like really examine it again more deeply
or engage with it.
They don't have to engage with it at all. And they'll seize on, they won't even talk about the interesting part of it because they'll seize on the execution stuff that is sort of more easily identifiable.
Well, this is Game of Thrones. This is, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, I think there's similarities there that these are both incredibly complicated lifts. These things are attempting even more than they're given credit for, and that's true for a way, like for Star Wars or the Marvel movies, for example. Like they just make things look easy, so easy that they fool people into thinking they're more simple than they are. But Game of Thrones and Mass Effect are on a whole nother level. Like, and what they're doing does look harder. It shows the difficulty in some more apparent ways. But I think people still take for granted just how incredibly complex the plotting and world building that's going into this is, because it comes across pretty clearly.
They think of this as Star Wars, and it's not. Star Wars is nowhere near the level of sophistication when it comes to world building or having thought this through. I mean, it just isn't. Yeah. I mean, it can't be.
It's also not outside of Knights of the Republic. It's not trying to do choose your own adventure.
Right.
Story. Mm-hmm. No one's ever tried to take up this mantle to do choose your own adventure prestige storytelling.
It's tough.
Like even BioWare with like the Dragon Age thing, those are the individual entries are a lot more disconnected from each other.
Very, yeah. And I think only the original Dragon Age even comes close, I think, when it comes to this specific thing.
Yeah. But it's also confined to one game. So it has more freedom to move than the other games. And I like Game of Thrones. Yeah, people recognize that those are complicated books, but I don't think people credit properly just how like the insane depth of the world building there that some other fantasy things have, but also the commitment to like the realism, the more, we're not going to play out fantasy tropes normally. Everything has to be spun around or put on its head. And that gets more and more difficult as you go along, on top of just the sprawl of the scope of it. It spans continents and multiple nations and hundreds of characters, and how they all have to pay off in some way.
Well, how do you do an ending that defies storytelling expectation and convention?
It has to pay things off satisfying, but also part of Game of Thrones convention is it has to also contain a big twist that is upsetting. So,
it does that. It does that. I actually think if you watch Game of Thrones now, it's blaringly obvious what the story is. Like where these characters are headed. It is like, well, of fucking course, that's Daenerys' story. That's the only place it really could have realistically gone, given the worldview and the way it's been set up. It makes total sense, but it didn't work that way.
That's what I think. But also, I know that people who disagree, who had an initial bad reaction to it, are never going to are just not going to engage with that. And they're just going to say, well, but it's stupid that people were moving around the map too fast now.
And it is, but yeah.
And it is. That's a problem. I can't. And this is probably Mass Effect 2, or Mass Effect also, that like a lot of the anger at the destroy ending in particular, I think was rooted in people just not liking the cost associated with it. And
I think it's simple as they didn't like that Shepard dies. I think it's that.
Oh, simple. I think people were more okay with that than they were with killing Edie and the Geth. It's like you've gone through the trouble of saving the Geth.
I think gamers want total victory at the end. I think, I put all this time in, I deserve to win. I think is
right, but that's what. Yeah. I don't know that Shepard living or dying.
Oh, they want Shepard
is as big of a piece of that as this. I should have been able to save this other person. I mean, I think you're right. The destroy ending can have Shepard live though, and that doesn't seem to ameliorate it. The reaction very much.
Did you? I always remember I saw what we're talking about. There's a cut scene at the very end. If you have enough war asset points and you choose destroy, of the camera panning over, a sort of is it a pile of dead keepers or something like that, and
Just
finding
rubble.
Shepard's body, and then it sort of twitches, and then it cuts
You see like the
Yeah.
shoulder of Shepard's armor sticking out of the rubble, and then you just see him like inhale, like take a breath, like the shoulder raises a little bit as it takes a single breath. I like that. It's cool.
It is, and it's nice. The developer, one of the developers in one of the interviews, I forget which one, was saying like, well, maybe he's alive, or maybe it's the last gasp of a man on a ship that's about to explode. We don't really give you context there, which is a pretty good fuck you as well. They wanted him dead. They definitely wanted this to end with Shepard dying.
Yes, which is fine, I think. But here's the point I'm trying to get at here.
I'm fine with it too.
Is there's a part here where the gamers, as much as I'm denigrating them, they're also reacting. The game has taught them how to play the game. And this, in the finale, changes the rules of how choices in Mass Effect are supposed to work. Where, in the first game, Kaidan versus Ashley is a very stark choice, but it's your choice. And even up to Mass Effect 3, that if you can't make peace between the Quarians and the Geth, it's taking that same concept and blowing up the scale. You can save one or the other. And the game isn't really going to punish you either way. I mean, you're going to lose something, and that is a sort of scripted, sacrifice, but you don't lose anything going forward. Kaidan and Ashley are functional equivalents on your team. They have different abilities, but you're not appreciably weaker for choosing one or the other. And there's no corresponding option among these endings where choosing destroy would kill off the Geth and Edie, but choosing control would have the effect of killing off all the Turians. That's the type of sacrifice we've been conditioned to accept in these games. And that lack of choice, or at least the lack of carefully counterbalanced choices with the scales loaded up with functional equivalents on both sides, I like that as an artistic decision. But I admit it is antithetical to what Mass Effect has been doing and selling to us all along up to this point. I choose to look at that as an artistic decision rather than a failure in game design. Maybe there's some level on which that's 6 in one hand and half a dozen in the other. How many artistic choices in any medium have ever been made that are not dictated or at least influenced by constraints in time or logistics in their creation?
It is that, but it is also. Well, that seems like that's always the case with BioWare under EA, but less so with these than with the Dragon Age games. This really feels like the ending they wanted, for better or worse. Maybe the execution wasn't what they wanted, but this is how they wanted to end this ultimately, where they landed. Whether it was always the plan or not, probably not. But this feels like an auteur's ending, in a sense. And I think that's what sucks for people. I think that, it's not what's been promised by this Star Wars shaped package, that this is like a literary ending of sorts that is about themes and ideas and doesn't really, fulfill the promise of the previous 80 hours or whatever you've put into it. So that's frustrating. Obviously.
Yeah, I must say, I do think this, you're right, is an auteur's ending. And I just want to note that is a term that carries a lot of prestige with it. But an auteur's ending can suck ass.
Of course.
It comes to that territory. That it doesn't mean it's great.
I don't think this sucks ass, though. I think
I don't think it does. But I'm saying just calling it that does not mean that it is brilliant on its own merits.
Without a doubt,
it just means that it is singular, which again sort of cuts against what we've been promised here, which is everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, what would the opposite be of an auteur's? Rise of Skywalker would be the opposite of an auteur's ending. But what's exactly a successful one? What's a successful
non-auteur ending? Return of the Jedi.
I guess so. Yeah. That is just what everyone wants. Here you go. And there are people who are just who bristle against that. We're just did they all need to fucking live? Did Lando need to live? That is sort of the beginning of people being wait a minute, Star Wars. I guess. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe Avengers Endgame is the ultimate example, the most successful version that.
Yeah.
Even that.
Even the people
they kill off Iron Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of kill off Captain America, although he also kind of just goes to heaven. So, I don't know. But I think you can make there's some elements to that I think are a little. have a tinge of auteurism to them, but that's probably the example of just purely crowd pleasing, checking all the boxes. You know, I don't know. I would say like Harry Potter's up there as far as like,
yeah, that's a good call actually.
That's the I think that's the still that and Endgame are up there, but on a purely plot level of checking off all the plot boxes that have been strewn over decades of prior storytelling.
Right.
Those are like mechanically